Bienvenue tout le monde à ce deuxième panel de notre sommet exécutif. Le thème d'aujourd'hui ou de ce panel s'articule autour des technologies en santé et l'infrastructure numérique. Donc, dans cette période de pandémie, c'est évidemment très pertinent comme sujet. So, welcome all to this second panel articulated around health technologies and digital infrastructure. It would be an understatement to say that these issues have been brought to the forefront this year. But it's also part of a larger trend, obviously, around digital transformation inside organizations and innovation and so on. So I'm very much looking forward to hear from our panelists. And this panel will be hosted by our colleague, Ulrika Bar-Gedalia, and she's our Senior Director of the Digital Economy here at the Chamber. So Ulrika, over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much for the kind introduction and overview, Mario, and welcome everyone to the second panel of the day. As Mario mentioned, it is now about health technologies, innovation, and digital infrastructure. And I'm being joined today by a fabulous panel of 4 experts. And I had the pleasure to meet each one of you through a conversation prior to leading up to this conversation here today. And let me say the diversity in perspectives and backgrounds, I'm sure will make for a terrific conversation. Can't wait to dive into it. And looking just at my screen, I start with introducing Cole Pinot of Pfizer here with us today, Marie-Chantal Coté of Sun Life, Dr. Christine Allen of the University of Toronto, and Jaggi Sihota of Telus Health. So thank you everyone and welcome again. And why don't we start off, if I may, ask Marie-Chantal with some opening remarks to set the tone and lead us to the panel discussion later on. So you're up first, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Ulrike. Bonjour à tous et toutes à travers le pays, and thank you for having me. I'm very thrilled and excited to be with all of you today on this really esteemed panel. So at Sun Life, it is part of our purpose to help Canadians achieve lifetime financial security, but also to help them achieve a healthier life. And we always look for ways to help Canadians and employers across the country with access to health outcomes. If we look back in the last year, and the timing is really a year ago, Canadian employers have really looked and put in place some really creative ways to support their businesses, but also to ensure to support their employees. Employee health, physical as well as mental health, has never been more important than what we've seen in the last year. In response to that changing landscape since the last year, employer-sponsored benefit plans have really seen a shift as well over the last year. So I'm really looking forward to talking to you about that today.
All right, Marie-Chantal, thank you so much. May I hand the mic to you, Cole, please? You go next.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Bonjour. It's been 1 year since this pandemic was declared, and since then, Pfizer and BioNTech have successfully developed a safe and efficacious vaccine for the prevention of COVID-19 in record time using a novel technology platform. We planned for success and scaled up a very complex supply chain. We also established a highly innovative delivery system for a product requiring ultra cold storage and have shipped directly to hundreds of administration sites in Canada. This achievement was extraordinary. The first vaccine authorized for Canadians arrived 9 months after the pandemic was declared, but we didn't do it alone. This success required an unparalleled level of collaboration with the Government of Canada. We worked tirelessly to pivot from a traditional regulatory approval pathway to a more flexible rolling submission. And we were able to provide the product almost 2 months earlier than originally anticipated. It's a tremendous accomplishment by so many, and we're very proud of this historic event. Today, well over 1 million vaccines are arriving weekly, and thousands of Canadians are being vaccinated daily in all provinces. While we are optimistic about how this will help us emerge from this pandemic, we also need to reflect on how we can be better prepared for the next one. There are best practices and lessons to be learned. We have a unique opportunity to look back at Canada's pre-pandemic situation with clarity and work together in order to improve the life sciences sector in this great country. Canadians have a newfound appreciation for the value of a resilient local biopharmaceutical industry. Working so collaboratively with the government on ensuring Canadians will have timely access to a COVID-19 vaccine has shown us that it is possible to find solutions that benefit the Canadian population while placing value on innovation. We have been advocating for this level of engagement for several years in the areas of pricing reform and other sector policies. Beyond vaccines, as future innovative breakthrough treatments in areas such as oncology, rare disease, and acute care are discovered, Canada needs to have a regulatory and pricing framework that encourages and fosters early access for patients. We stand ready to have this much needed conversation and contribute to Canada's future. Thank you. I look forward to the discussion.
Well, and thank you, Cole, for these introductory remarks, which set the stage for our conversation for sure. Christine, may I ask you to go next, please?
Absolutely. I'm delighted to be here today. I'm the Associate Vice President and Vice Provost Strategic Initiatives at the University of Toronto. And in this role, I oversee the development and sustainability of large-scale interdisciplinary and cross-divisional research initiatives. I'm also a professor at the University of Toronto. I'm in the Faculty of Pharmacy and I've been here almost 20 years, and I specialize in drug formulation and development. So I'm going to bring these different perspectives to the conversation today. And I really hope that we take advantage of this moment in time as a country to emerge from the pandemic stronger, or as some are saying, to build back better, in particular, when it comes to ensuring the future health security of all Canadians. And our leading academic institutions and hospital research institutes must be a part of this solution. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. And Jackie, please, over to you.
Hello and bonjour. Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here as part of this panel. I'm the Vice President of Consumer Health here at Telus. And Cole, I'm waiting for my vaccine, so can't wait. And kudos to you and the Pfizer team on that front. So many years ago, our CEO, Darren Entwistle, asserted that Telus wasn't just a telecommunications company. We were a technology company, and he challenged us to build innovative solutions to connect Canadians to really what matters most. And we saw the challenges that were happening in the public sector. And as an organization, we said that the private sector needed to help the public sector with what we deem is going to be the largest and most difficult challenge, social challenge of our generation, which is healthcare. We launched Telus Health over a decade ago. We could never have known that we would find ourselves in a global pandemic situation, but we've always known that Canadians deserve the very best possible healthcare solutions, and that technology can be a catalyst for the efficient delivery of care. So much so that over this last decade, we've invested more than $3.2 billion building our healthcare business and really dedicating ourselves to revolutionizing access to healthcare by answering this #1 social issue of our time, which is healthcare efficiency, effectiveness through digital innovation, and across our healthcare ecosystem. Now we're a year into COVID, in the COVID-19 global crisis. We've seen the adoption of our virtual healthcare services increase exponentially. We launched our services before the crisis happened, so we knew that there was a need out there, and the pandemic has certainly underscored that. And again, we've seen explosive growth. We know that digital healthcare solutions like virtual care, they're here to stay. We will continue to innovate and scale these solutions because we believe that by building a primary healthcare ecosystem that places the patient truly at the center, we can deliver better health outcomes for our fellow Canadians. And COVID-19 has demonstrated the critical need to ensure every one of us, rural, remote, through every intersectional lens, we all deserve to have equal access to healthcare solutions. And so that work remains to be done to connect even further, and we're absolutely at the forefront of that. And we're proud of the work that we've done so far. And there's still much more to do, but we're definitely on our way. So we are absolutely at Telus committed to leveraging our world-leading technology to enable remarkable human outcomes and to support Canadians in digital transformation, particularly as it relates to healthcare.
All right, thank you so much, Jackie, for this overview. And may I stay with you and ask actually a follow-up question? thinking about throughout the pandemic, we heard a lot about almost everyone moved online, everything went online, and we hear a lot about digital by default. That brings me to your comments on digital health. So how has the pandemic actually changed the digital health landscape in Canada?
Yeah, I think healthcare is one of the last, I think, industries that really do need to get into this space of digital transformation. You hear still in Canada about the fax. The fax machine still reigns in many places, especially in hospitals. And there's lots that still can be done. I think what's really important, though, with the digitization of healthcare is to ensure that quality of healthcare, privacy of data, and movement of data, and making sure that we've got continuity of healthcare in mind and in plan is really essential. So what happened when the pandemic came about is all of a sudden we saw 80% decline in physical visits to clinics because, of course, people couldn't go to their doctors and it didn't feel safe to go to their doctors. Again, as I mentioned, we had launched our Babylon by Telus Health service a year previous to that. And so we knew that the service, that people wanted it. There was a lot of, let's say, bureaucracy that perhaps was in the way, a lot of antiquated thinking in the healthcare space. And what usually would take decades, what did Lenin say? It took weeks. Then we saw decades happen in weeks, right? And then all of that bureaucracy that was in the way was seemingly moved out of the way because the demand was there and we were out of options. And so what we saw was an explosive and exponential growth in virtual care. And I think this is true for all virtual healthcare providers, not just us in the country. Because what people were then experiencing is, how am I going to see my doctor? How am I going to talk to my doctor? And other healthcare issues certainly don't care that you're in a pandemic situation. And people still need to see their doctors for regular issues and chronic issues, of course. And so when they started using the service, because it was available to them, and with our Babylon by Telus Health service, it's free, it's covered through your provincial healthcare plans. People saw that this was an alternative, and a very good alternative to what else that they had in front of them. And I think that when I talk about continuity of care, we have Canadians, there's about 5 million Canadians that don't have access to a regular family doctor. And, I don't think a lot of people understand that. And when people retire, when family doctors retire, it becomes exceedingly difficult to go and find a replacement. And that's for a number of different reasons I won't get into today. But what ends up happening is that you're out of luck in terms of being able to go and find someone. And if you're in a rural area, the situation is even worse. So what we did with our service is we designed it so that we have continuity of care. If you're a lucky person to actually have a family doctor and you visit one of our Canadian licensed doctors with our Babylon service, we will send them the notes so that they know exactly what's happening to you and what's going on with your quality of your care so that they can continue to be that quarterback for you. So when the pandemic hit, Ulrike, a lot of the bureaucracy and the policies, they fell by the wayside for the right reasons. And patients drew in exponential ways to the services across the country. And I think that that's actually a really positive thing that's happened from a pandemic. I think great things can happen from disastrous situations, and I think that that's one of them. This was long overdue, and it'll force all of us to continue to innovate and to become even better with the services that we provide. And who benefits from that? Canadians. Canadians will benefit ultimately from that, and that's our goal.
Well, thank you very much for this, Jackie. And I want to pick up on a couple of items. Continuity of care. There's a lot about innovation as well you're talking about, and access to care, providing that access, I'm sure, from coast to all Canadians. That's really fantastic, which brings me also to the topic of Marie-Chantal, if I may ask you, access to care and what employers have been actually providing or doing for employees throughout these challenging times.
Yeah, exactly, because this period also put and Jaggi was talking about health innovations, and the pandemic put focus as well on employer provided benefits and solutions provided to those benefits. I'd like to give 3 examples. The first one is in the paramedical support and space, in particular virtual delivery of paramedical services. Prior to the pandemic, we at Sun Life and most insurers did not really cover the bulk of paramedical services delivered virtually: physiotherapy, chiropractor, psychology, etc. And therefore, when the pandemic hit in March, most of these services then stopped right away being delivered in person. And many of our clients then wanted to shift to a virtual delivery, and providers were willing to do so, but that was not covered within the benefit plans. So after doing some good research, talking to experts in that field, there was really strong evidence in the quality of care provided virtually. And we therefore shifted to support those virtual delivered ones where it made sense. And we still do today. So basically, that's been one of the shifts through the pandemic, is we actually evolved the coverage of paramedical services to include the ones that make sense virtually. And in many parts of the country, for many families, that actually really opened up access to care. Second thing, as Jaggi was talking about, is virtual care. I think virtual telemedicine that accelerated significantly the need for access to medicine 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, the need to not have to wait in a waiting room or have closures or restricted hours, etc. To your point, Jaggi, children didn't stop having ear infections, rashes, etc. That didn't stop. So that grew significantly. Employers across the country provided that service to their employees. So that's another area where access to health was provided very significantly by employers. And the third piece, and you'll hear me talk a lot about mental health, because we all knew that prior to the pandemic, there was a mental health crisis in the country, and a few data points I'll share make us believe strongly that the situation is no better. So before the pandemic, in 2019, 500,000 Canadians missed work every single week because of mental health. In our business at Sun Life, in 2019, the leading cause of long-term disability was mental health. 30% of all of our LTD cases were tied into mental health, and the second diagnosis was cancer, with only 15%. So we had twice as many long-term disability diagnosed or disability cases tied of mental health than cancer. Our research also that we did recently showed that 60% approximately of Canadians have been negatively impacted because of mental health. So we started with the data I just told you. Now you overlay an impact on mental health because of COVID, and more than 50% are not receiving their support for mental health. So it was a crisis before, and it's more of a crisis now. The reason that most people are not seeking the medical help that they need: affordability, worried about stigma, or embarrassed, or not knowing how. So we'll talk about it a little bit more, but this is another place where employers with benefit plans, with EAPs, with paramedical dollars, with virtual solutions, etc., have really, really helped employees when they needed it the most.
Yeah, Marie-Chantal, thank you very much for sharing this. And indeed, I mean, I myself have been reading so many reports on the increase in mental health challenges and mental well-being. So it's much appreciated to provide that focus on it and sharing it. And along the lines, again, of health and healthcare, and Jaggi, you asked about it before, it brings me to vaccines, Cole, and to ask you in that context, actually about the innovation journey. I mean, Pfizer-BioNTech was the first COVID-19 vaccine to be approved worldwide, and that was sometime late last year, as you had shared with me. And there must have been a journey involved, an adventure, if I may call it, to really come to that record launch in such a short period of time. So if you could please share a little bit more on that front with us.
Yeah, happy to. Thanks for the question. And I think it's building on the previous two panelists' answers, is that we're all making different, more informed decisions with heightened engagement during the pandemic. So for Pfizer, it was making a deliberate decision to take risks and to parallel path development and manufacturing activities. We invested $2 billion to scale up our manufacturing processes before we knew the efficacious and safety profile of the vaccine. So taking those key risks and planning for success was critical to us being able to deliver this vaccine in record time. One of the key elements, and I know it's on everyone's mind right now, is we focus on nationalism that's occurring in Europe and the US, is one of the key elements for us was to leverage our global supply chain network. There's over 280 components that go into our vaccine. That comes from 86 different suppliers who are based in 19 different countries. So it's really important for us to recognize that it's not just a question of one company or one country. It's really a global, interconnected life sciences sector that needs to work together to be able to meet this tremendous response in the face of the pandemic. So if I were to pick one lesson learned about our innovation journey, it really would be around the way in which, as was mentioned, we've gotten other stakeholders to think differently. Health Canada making a decision in September to introduce a rolling submission really allowed us to accelerate the launch of our vaccine in December. And one of the lessons learned is that if we had been working more collaboratively when the pandemic first hit and had implemented that rolling submission from the beginning, Canada could have been like the UK and the US and Israel, all countries that had been planning for a December launch from the beginning. So as we were building our supply chain allocations, we could have anticipated more volume for Canada earlier. And so I think that's one of the missing links in this narrative around why Canada hasn't been quote unquote at the front of the line like all Canadians would like them to be. It's really because we've had to pivot from anticipating a middle Q1 approval, which is very much the way that Australia has responded to the pandemic. They kept a regulatory review process in place. They got the Pfizer vaccine was first administered to the Prime Minister of Australia in early February. So we have a head start on Australia, but we could have been more like the US and UK if we had been collaborating early. So hopefully, as we learn from these lessons and work towards building the life sciences sector resiliency going forward, we can be better prepared for the next pandemic.
Yeah, thanks for sharing this, Cole, which is very well aligned actually with conversations I had with you, Christine, and some of your colleagues at the University of Toronto. We were talking about domestic supply chains, biomanufacturing, how to boost it, and some announcement in that context actually that government has been rolling out, including the consultation that actually the chamber also fed into. It was March 12th, I remember it so well, the deadline. And so, you know, Christine, following up on conversations we had, what investments should we be looking for at the federal budget actually with regards to these topics? And we know it's April 19th, we have the date now.
Yes, I know.
Yeah. So I'd like to hear a little more from you on this front in follow-up to our conversations as well that we had prior to the summit.
Okay, thank you, Ulrike. Well, health security is certainly, I think, top of mind right now for many Canadians. And as you know, health security encompasses many different areas: public health and prevention, mitigation of the impacts of disease, global collaboration and cooperation. We're hearing about the importance of collaboration today, and the ability to address the needs of a country's population for life-saving diagnostic technologies, vaccines, and treatments. So as you mentioned, the federal government recently sought advice and proposals to build or rebuild the biomanufacturing sector as part of a strategy to boost Canada's health security. And we certainly support the government's interest in this area. However, in addition to biomanufacturing, we need to invest in what I consider two key areas. One is a pipeline of biomedical innovations such that we actually do have vaccines and therapeutics to manufacture down the road. And the second is an investment in highly qualified personnel or workforce to support everything from discovery of new innovations like vaccines through to biomanufacturing and product development. And our leading academic institutions must be considered as part of the solution to boosting Canada's health security. We anchor much of the bioinnovation economy or ecosystem, in Canada. So if it was up to me, and unfortunately it's not, I would invest in a number of key areas in addition to biomanufacturing facilities. So first, being research. We absolutely need investment in high risk, high reward research and pivotal studies that raise the technology readiness levels of new therapeutics and technologies that are emerging from academic institutions and hospital research institutes. Second, I would invest in state-of-the-art infrastructure such that we can support not only the cutting-edge academic research that I'm talking about, but also collaborative studies with government and industry. Third, I would invest in first-in-human or early-stage clinical trials. And so these are critical to ensuring we get these new therapeutics that are being developed into people quickly and see whether or not they are actually safe and efficacious. And finally, I would provide funds to support the growth of our most promising early stage startups such that they can scale in Canada. And this is critical to retaining talent and IP locally. So those are the strategic investments that I'm hoping the government makes.
Well, thank you very much, Christine. And I would like to stay with you actually for a moment here, as we just talked about the investments leading up to the budget that you had made note of, and perhaps also from your perspective, what government policy initiatives you would like to see being supported and which is necessary for perhaps a more improved or better ecosystem. We spoke about the health innovation ecosystem, maybe life science ecosystem. So what policies would you like to recommend there or would like to see being implemented?
Okay, well, first, centrally, I think it's important to note that Canada is spending less now on research and development as a proportion of GDP than 2 decades ago. From 2% of GDP in 2004 to 1.54% in 2019. So Canada's universities are proposing to return R&D investments to 2% of GDP by 2026. And so as a result, from my perspective, we need government policy initiatives that support increased investment in R&D. So how can the government do this? They need policies that strengthen our biomedical and pharmaceutical industries in Canada and encourage and enable collaboration between academia, our strong hospital network, and industry. This will foster innovation, close the translation and commercialization gaps in our country, create and retain IP and retain talent in our country. So 2 ways that I can see to encourage collaboration between academia and industry is to ensure that universities have the specialized infrastructure to support industry's needs and that there are funds available for industry to work with academics. Critical infrastructure for the government to invest in right now, in addition to biomanufacturing, are CL3 facilities. These are the facilities that are required to work with SARS-CoV-2. Other countries right now are investing intensely in CL3 and CL4 facilities. The European Union has 40 coordinated labs that respond to infectious disease outbreaks. China is setting up CL3 facilities in every province with 30 new labs envisioned. We are in dire need of investment in our CL3 facilities. These to me are not facilities that industry should have to set up and maintain on their own. And in fact, small companies are not positioned to set up and maintain CL3 facilities. The CL3 facility at the University of Toronto has been critical to enabling a number of technologies and therapeutics to move forward to address COVID-19. So in addition to that, in addition to these kind of key infrastructure investments, we also need government policies that support the growth or scale up of startup companies with dedicated funding. And one mechanism for this would be something similar to the VICI or the Venture Capital Catalyst Fund, which allocated, I think, around $400 million over 3 years starting in 2017. So in short, we need policies that result in increased spending in research and development in Canada. This will drive innovation, create and retain IP, and create and retain talent. And most importantly, lead to new technologies and therapeutics for Canadians.
All right, thank you very much. That's had to go back onto turning off my mute button there. Christine, thank you for sharing all this. This is an overview on statistics and technologies. And I always see in every challenge and opportunity what we are lacking and the room for improvement, looking into the future. The future is bright. This is how I like to have a view on everything and stay optimistic. But thank you so much in this. And in this regard, I want to shall I call it, switch gears and focus a little bit on aging populations that we have in many respects, many rural and remote areas in particular, where families settle, take care of their aging parents and elderly family members. And where, again, for me, the topic of telehealth and services comes to mind, as we can offer these remote services. And Jackie, you mentioned virtual healthcare before and digital health as well. And how can we ensure that telehealth services will stay well beyond the pandemic, from coast to coast for all Canadians, going back to good digital infrastructure and services?
It's a great question. I think a couple of things. One is on your topic of the aging population. We in Canada have more people over the age of 65 than under the age of 15 today. So we have one of the most aged populations around the world, and within the next decade will look more like Japan than any other country. So, you know, we certainly do need to spend time thinking about our seniors and how to best provide them with the level of care that they so preciously deserve. And I think COVID-19 has demonstrated a lack of that care from an end-to-end perspective in our country. We know around the world, truly, but also in Canada, where we can and should do much better than we have. One thing I would offer up from our perspective is we at Telus, we have a service called Living Well Companion. We are the largest Canadian-owned personal emergency response system service company in that regard. And really what we offer is people the opportunity to live at home instead of in a home when that is an option. And so if they have a fall, if they're frail and they fall at home, we offer 24/7 connectivity and support. And given that this is a population group that is usually on a fixed income and they're quite vulnerable in many regards, we are a social capitalism organization. And so we're offering the lowest cost and most affordable solution in that regard. And we will continue to do so as we continue to innovate for other solutions to help people when they have the option to be at home instead of in a home. So there's more to come on that front. How do we ensure that digital healthcare technology sticks around? Well, I take a look at the adoption that's happening across the country today. And it is, as we mentioned and Marie-Chantal also outlined earlier, it's at unprecedented levels. I think people now can see the convenience, they see the security and the privacy of the service. You know, we know from our service support that almost 80% of primary care visits can be done through telemedicine. It's not for everything, and it's certainly not for emergency situations. You should get into an ER if there's an emergency situation. Don't go to telemedicine for that. But 80% of primary care can be resolved. And what we're also seeing, Ulrike, is what is the patient saying? What are the patients telling us in terms of their satisfaction with the service? I can tell you that every 30 seconds, someone's downloading our Babylon by Telus Health app in the country. Every 90 seconds, someone is having a consultation with one of my doctors. And we have done hundreds of thousands of those. And our average patient quality rating from using the service is 4.9 out of 5. I'm not talking about the app rating. I'm talking about after you have a consultation with one of our family doctors, what did you think about the service that you were provided with? And when you step back, we don't ask that question often enough or in a statistical way in our healthcare system. I think we shy away from it. And so now with digital technology, I can do that in an effective way. I can see what the statistics are telling us. And they're telling us that patients that are using the service are giving us a 4.9 out of 5 quality rating. So how do you come back from that? That has to continue to scale and to continue to grow. It's like asking, would people rather go to a bank now and hand in their ATM cards and not do banking through their mobile phones? Once people can see the benefit of it and they experience the benefit of it, I don't think that there's any turning back. What do we need to do going forward? We need to continue to innovate. We need to continue to partner with stakeholders in government, in healthcare. Healthcare practitioners are critical. And we also have to make sure that the patient is being heard and is as part of that group as we continue to scale and innovate the solutions. There's lots more that we can do. We can connect the systems better together. We can make sure that the data is getting into the right hands at the right time, so the right health outcome can be achieved across the healthcare continuum, beyond primary care, and working more closely with hospital systems. So there's lots left that needs to be done. Stakeholder engagement is critical in that regard. The patient must be a part of those conversations as we design solutions for their use and for their benefit.
Yeah, thank you, Jaggi. Again, there is so much information expertise, which is why I really enjoy this diversity of perspectives and backgrounds and just all that knowledge and wealth of knowledge coming together here, which another area in terms of knowledge and key learnings and benefits, all the words we've been using here. It's health benefits and workplace benefits, which is Sun Life's area. Anything, Marie-Chantal, your key learnings from 220? I mean, there were so many key learnings in 220, but I'm sure there's some as well in this area, which I look forward to hearing from you about. Thank you.
Yeah, and many are piggyback on the comments from my colleagues on the panel. So from the beginning, I talked about some opportunities. So I'll go back on the learnings, maybe on those opportunities, starting with virtual care specifically. And as you know, we started this acceleration with a partnership with Dialogue at Sun Life just pretty much a year ago. So we have a lot of data and insights that we can share. And I'd say in the virtual care, I'd talk about speed, value, and breadth and data that we have on all three. So Jaggi was talking about a bit, many experts in that field will say that the adoption curve has accelerated 5 to 10 years in the last year. So different data points will say different years, but 5 to 10 years is the average that people are willing to agree on. So the speed of adoption has been unheard of. Like Jaggi, the data will say in the industry that 70 to 80% of conditions can be treated or can be diagnosed with a treatment plan through virtual care. Our block shows 73%. So 73% of interactions were handled through the virtual conversation and not referred to an emergency, a physical conversation, etc. So the second piece we're saying is there is a lot of breadth in the conditions that can be treated or diagnosed virtually. If you look at the conditions that have been diagnosed with a treatment plan, number one in our block from the last year is dermatology. Number two, mental health. So even when we look, and that was a great learning, because when we look at where one has access to support and diagnostic in the mental health space, as I mentioned earlier, one of the key reasons people don't take action is because they don't know where to start. So when we saw that, we were pleased, because what we learned is this is an easy access for all employees, because then they're guided through the journey. And the other piece of learning was that in average, a person that uses telemedicine will save 4.1 hours per appointment. That's time avoided for commuting, waiting, commuting back, etc. So 4.1 hours saved per virtual visit. So a lot of learnings around the value, the breadth, and the speed in the virtual care space. Moving to mental health, the biggest learning, as I mentioned earlier, is the desire to seek help, but the not knowing how to seek help. So remember, I talked about affordability, embarrassment, or stigma, or not knowing where to start. Employers have a wonderful desire to help. 73% of small companies plan to invest in that space over the next 2 years. 96% of large companies plan to invest in that space over the next 2 years. All employers and employees are telling us they don't necessarily know where to start or how to go about it. So what we've tried to do to try to solve that is create some support in both places. So for employers, we created a mental health strategy toolkit that, by the way, is available to all organizations, whether you're a Sun Life client or not. And it really helps guide you on the journey as an employer, because we believe employers have a really big role to play in supporting their employees in their mental health path. And the second piece we created, and we're piloting a mental health coach for each plan member. So it's for each employee. So it guides them on their individual path around what is the next piece for them. Should they use their EAP? Should they use virtual care? Should they use virtual CBT, pharmacogenomics, etc.? So our key learning in the mental health space is both employers and employees want to take action, but they need help to figure out how, and they need safe spaces to have the conversations and be guided.
Thank you very much on the front of sharing more key learnings with us, which Cole definitely brings me as well to you and the key learning you had mentioned in your opening remarks, and another area we were talking about earlier with you here is our unpreparedness in terms of the capacity to produce vaccines as it relates to Canada. And you've been quite vocal as well in the press and in the media about it, as well as more recently at a parliamentary committee with a focus on the lack of collaboration between the federal government, as you had shared with me, and as well your industry. And just you compared other countries as well to Canada and what they have perhaps done a little better or were differently prepared. And I'd like to hear from you a little more about this area in particular, please.
Absolutely. And I'll just echo many of the points that Christine made earlier, that resiliency is more than a couple of manufacturing facilities that can produce mRNA vaccines. That's what we're hearing about in the press. We really need to build up the entire life sciences sector if Canada is going to be successful going forward. And I agree with her comments that over the past several decades, there have been detrimental policies that have had a clear impact on Canada's level of pandemic readiness. So investments are occurring in other countries. Pharmaceutical companies are taking their discretionary capital and putting them in markets that are more favorable to supporting innovation. So we can work together to build the life sciences sector, but Canada needs to demonstrate that it's going to put a stop to one-way consultations and engage in real dialogue with our industry. And the areas that we want to talk about: R&D, strong IP protection, investing in people, like Christine said, adapting the regulatory system, improving patient access, building supply chain resilience, and continuing to advocate for open and ambitious trade. I think this one is one that the government is quickly, out of necessity, building up an expertise, given where the supply of vaccine is coming from today. There's a real opportunity to pivot and build up the capacity of the life sciences sector in a way in which Canada could serve the world. Its needs can be met relatively easy relative to the scale at which it could supply Europe, the rest of North America, and parts of Asia. So we'd really encourage Canada to think more ambitiously about its future role in meeting the needs of life sciences sector. But it really has to start with changing its current approach to policy.
Well, and Cole, you mentioned resilience and resiliency, and that was mentioned here before as well. And maybe to elaborate a little further on it, you just touched upon it as well as the life science ecosystem, where we should see an expansion and improvement, and would be much appreciated. Or in other terms, how can Canada stand out? That is so important in terms of the competition we face on a global scale. I mean, competition is fierce, whether it is for vaccines or for talent. Christine was mentioning as well, talent before, and to ensure our health security is well under control and taken care of. So perhaps you have a few other comments to make on this front, on how Canada can stand out and set a mark on the global scale and take care of ourselves and our own nation as well, and then citizens.
Absolutely. And so maybe to start, I think we have to move away from this quick win mentality to a more lasting win approach. And that really starts by breaking down some of the silos that exist within the current infrastructure. You know, for example, other markets combine the regulatory group with the group that's responsible for fostering innovation. So EMA, for example, has an innovation mandate, and so does the FDA. We need Health Canada to really own this thing holistically and be accountable for all elements of driving innovation. Christine mentioned robust research and development infrastructure. I think this is one area where Canada today, of all the different areas of life sciences sector, it's the strongest. It could be even better, and we need to invest more. She provided great data to show how the level of investment has dropped off over time. This is one I believe that if we were to restore that funding, Canada could again take a leadership position in the world, and I would love to see that happen. I mentioned creating an agile regulatory system. We need a more predictable and stable environment to understand when we're bringing forward innovative new therapies, how long it's going to take to get them through the regulatory review process, and how we can improve patient access to know when those products will be available to Canadians covered by both private and public payers. And so improving in those areas would be a great start to rise up to the level that exists in other countries, and then hopefully take a meaningful step forward.
Yeah, thank you, Cole, for sharing these insights and always keeping an eye on the global landscape. It's incredibly important to understand the competitive nature and scale that's out there. And I ask in my question, how can Canada stand out? And maybe let me turn it around into how can we be outstanding? And it brings me back to the topic of mental health and perhaps as well virtual healthcare, where Jaggi, I think you have a few more, I'm sure, more comments to share and add to this conversation. I know the importance as well of mental health and well-being to Telus Health, as Marie-Chantal was referencing earlier as well.
Yes, thank you so much, Ulrike. And I fully echo Marie-Chantal's comments on the need for mental health. We see that with our Kira by Telus Health service, particularly for enterprise organizations that are looking for this solution. We are looking at it as well from a Babylon by Telus Health perspective with small, medium businesses. 48% of small, medium businesses are looking for better mental health care support. I think what's really important to take a look at when we do think about mental health is the intersectional lens. And what I mean by that is who is being disproportionately impacted more negatively on mental health in Canada. Well, there's some great research being done by the Prosperity Project under the leadership of Pamela Jeffrey. And I have the fortune of being a part of that. And what we're seeing there is women are disproportionately feeling the effects of mental health more than any other group. And in there, we see that working moms are seeing the most difficulties as it relates to mental health. 52% of working mothers are reporting that they're stressed, and 47% report anxiety, and 43% say that they're feeling depressed. That's of all working mothers. And so let's just sort of step back for a second here. You know, we're here with the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, and we're talking about business and leading in business. I think that we would be remiss if we're not taking a look at it specifically with that intersectionality lens and thinking what we can do to help working mothers, work, be productive, and also take care of their families. And the statistics and the research is showing us is that we need to do more. So I think that that's a very important point. And if we learn from the Spanish flu way back when, so many things are still at play today, I think, and there's lots of tuition value, even with the limited research that was done when the Spanish flu hit back in 1918, is that, there was some research coming out of Norway that said that, the 6 years following the Spanish flu, first-time hospitalizations for mental health issues increased 7-fold. And that's 6 years, for the 6 years after the pandemic actually ended. I think what we should be anticipating is a similar tsunami. I think that there is a twindemic here, which is a mental health pandemic that's going to be longer term. It'll be generational in its impact. And once COVID-19 is behind us, and it will be behind us, we need to be thinking about now, how are we going to help manage the mental health of Canadians, whether it's employees, whether it's citizens, whether it's mothers that are trying to work and take care of their families, or whether it's children that are socially isolated and negatively impacted by some of the policy decisions that are happening across the country that are needed and necessary for schooling. So there's lots of effort, and I encourage all of us. And so you say, how can Canada be outstanding? I think we all need to come together to address these issues from an end-to-end perspective. We can. We've got great progress happening right now. I think it will be through partnership of private sector and public sector as we address that. And I encourage our bureaucrats and our policymakers to be open and work with us to come together to solutions that will help all Canadians and not leave anyone behind.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jaggi. Not leaving anyone behind is such, it's really an important statement. I know we heard it a lot throughout the year, and but it cannot be said often enough. And actually thinking about it further, Christine, you had shared with me leading up to the summit some staggering, I must say, statistics in terms of some things that are being left behind, which are some medical actually procedures and treatments and so forth as a result of the pandemic, and healthcare workers and talent in that space, and a shortage, which brings us as well to the conversation again about talent. And I do recall the number being close to 354,000. That number just really stuck with me. So I would like to hear a little bit more on this topic from you, and what we can do in terms of talent and addressing that gap in talent.
Thank you, Ulrike. You're right. We've seen an estimated 354,000 medical procedures that have been postponed as a result of the pandemic. So what can we do to better support our healthcare talent? U of T graduates 2,500 students in health professions every year. A third of people working in the healthcare sector in Ontario have a University of Toronto degree. And I'm always inspired by our students, and have been particularly inspired during the pandemic. We've seen students, I'm sure you've seen some of the stories, volunteering to help healthcare workers with life tasks, helping seniors through helplines, serving at clinical practice sites, and they're continuing to do this now at the vaccine clinics, conducting COVID-19 related research. We had many students not even working in some of these research labs, but when the pandemic hit, volunteering to work in some of the research labs that were conducting COVID-19 research, and then undertaking responsibilities in those labs. And now, for example, I had a call the other day with our principal at University of Toronto, Mississauga, Alex Gillespie, and she shared with me the number of students that had volunteered at the vaccine clinic on the UTM campus. So when I see the students stepping up in this way while continuing to complete their challenging healthcare professional programs, I'm inspired and know that the future is bright when it comes to medicine in our country. In terms of supporting healthcare talent during the pandemic, our Faculty of Medicine, the Temerity Faculty of Medicine, has identified gaps and developed a number of supports for healthcare workers on how to integrate care during the pandemic. Guidances around chronic conditions, guidance on ICU procedures for non-ICU clinicians, tips for setting up virtual care, importantly, self-care. So we spoke about mental health before, so importantly, the importance of self-care for healthcare professionals, as well as guidances on integrating the principles of equity, diversity, and inclusion, and anti-racism in the care that they're providing. And we need to do this type of work to continue to identify gaps and provisions and supports to address gaps for healthcare workers, to ensure that these are professions that remain of interest actually to our best and brightest students. In the past year, unfortunately, we've also seen just the staggering and disproportionate impacts of COVID-19 on racialized communities. And we need to work to ensure that the healthcare workforce is representative of our population. At U of T, we have a number of pathways and programs to ensure underrepresented students are aware of the potential of healthcare careers and can access our application processes. As a result, in fact, last year, 24 Black students were accepted to medicine. This was the largest cohort of Black medical students in Canadian history. But as a country, we need to do much, much more. We need to ensure our emerging pool of healthcare talent includes strong representation from all designated groups. And upon graduation, that these bright and talented individuals have the opportunity to work in equitable and inclusive environments.
Yeah, Christine, thank you very much for that overview. And you mentioned the future is bright, and it's always lovely to maybe go into being mindful of the time. It's bright too, that in terms of the clock is ticking in a positive sense. And Marie-Chantal, may I quickly finish off as well, if you have some short comments, as I remember our conversation leading up to this on health innovations, what is here to stay? And that is a positive note, or beyond the pandemic, looking into the future with the lens of innovation in mind.
Yeah, thank you. So that's a great question. So I think that one thing that is coming out loud and clear from this conversation is one thing that is here to stay is the ongoing innovation, but the ongoing partnership across multiple sectors, all of us. So we have representations here from the academic background, businesses, health businesses across the country, the government, etc. So we believe strongly of the partnership and how we can together continue to focus this and push innovation. So that is probably something that will remain and should continue to be strong. Looking at specific innovations, I think we all pretty much or somewhat shape or form talked about virtual care. So we believe that is now a bit like Jagdeep described when people started using ATMs. Now it's a thing, so virtual care will be part of the ecosystem. There will be this ongoing relationship with of course, primary physicians, etc., but as part of the toolkit. Of course, we encourage governments to continue to invest and focus in that space, the enabling sharing of data, from virtual care to primary physician, harmonizing provincial licensing across the country, investing in broadband infrastructure like the provinces are doing, etc. But definitely virtual care is here to stay. And we think the focus on mental health for innovations is going to stay and grow. We encourage employers to normalize mental health issues, create safe spaces, offer tools, have the conversations to enable the usage of tools, etc. And we think that the paths that everybody is on are very unique. So we see much more personalized solutions that are geared to everyone's path, omni-channel, trying to really interact with everybody on their own channel, on their own way. But basically, we see this ongoing partnership to try to help every Canadian, no one left behind, and everybody's journey and path is quite unique.
Well, thank you, Marie-Chantal, and everyone else on this panel. It has been a wonderful, truly enriching conversation. And I mean it from the depths of my heart. This is such a wealth of expertise and insight, and always with a positive outlook, which we all really dearly need. So thank you very much again for participating in this conversation. And looking at the time, I apologize that we don't have really the time for closing statements. I hope that is acceptable to you. There are, as I had just checked, our box for questions. We did not have incoming questions. So everybody seems to be very content with what was shared and just probably blown away by the facts and all the learnings today. I like to see it positively. And so I will, at this point in time, introduce the next agenda item, and we move to our next one-to-one or one-on-one video, which is the last one of the day, of this truly exciting and very informative and insightful day that we had this far. And it will be with actually Mark Fitzgerald, the president and CEO of Petronas Canada. And he will be talking about Canada's role in reducing carbon emissions, something incredibly important, and Petronas' approach to achieving net zero. And actually aligned with this panel we just said, if I think about health, this is as well reducing carbon emissions. It's a healthier lifestyle and clean tech, and thinking about climate change in a very positive sense. It's all coming together, as well as technologies being utilized for that. And then following the video, we have another health break. And then I would encourage everyone to come back for our closing keynote address and fireside chat with Minister Champagne and our very own President and CEO, Perrin Beatty. So we see you all back here, I hope, at 3:05 p.m. EST. And thank you so much once again. It has been a true pleasure.